live event.
Yes.
So you're going to be competing with theaters like the Wiltern, with the Music Center, with other venues all over town. That seems kind of iffy as well.
Well, Huell, I don't think initially that you would be viewed in competition with those facilities. Those are state-of-the-art, first-run, high-class, expensive-to-use facilities. What we think we have down here are venues for folks who can't afford to pay a rent at the Music Center or the other facilities.
So you can have Latin performances down here.
Or Chinese performances.
Yeah.
Or Greek performances.
Well, look, we got, now this is another one of the real show places, isn't it? The Palace?
The Palace is one of the real treasures down here. It's one of Alfred Landsberg's first theaters, and he's one of the most important theater architects in this country. It was the third of 4 Orpheums. Right now seats about 1,200, originally seated 2,200. And to me, it's got great potential for a roadhouse. It's got a very intimate feel and a very large stage.
Well, there's certainly not a rush of people going in here now.
No.
And it's Spanish-speaking film.
Yeah.
And we're right across the street from the real gym, which is the Los Angeles Theater.
That's the one.
Boy, what a grand facade that is.
That's probably one of the 4 or 5 finest movie palaces ever built.
In the world?
In the world. And you hear that from us because we're so proud of it, but we've had people from all over the world come and tell us that, so we feel pretty safe in saying it.
Now, when you talk about these theaters like that, saying that this is one of the 4 or 5 best theaters in the world, movie palaces in the world, do you think most of us here in Los Angeles know that or appreciate that?
Huell, I think the odds are if you were born here or moved here after World War II, you've never even been to Broadway and don't even have a clue that these theaters are here. The Conservancy's done special events, Friends of the Orpheum, our group has, but we're just barely scratching the tip of the iceberg as far as getting enough people down here to see this and buy into it. These theaters are as powerful now as they were when they were built.
What do you mean it's powerful?
These theaters were built and designed to provoke your imagination, to open your mind, to affect you in some way that basically leaves your cares outside on the street and opens you up to whatever you're going to see on stage or on screen that night. And I don't think anyone who's ever walked into one of these theaters when it's lit properly and it's full of people and they're waiting for an event, I don't think you can help but get that feeling. Aside from churches and train stations, they're really our major public assembly buildings. And we really have to save that sense of assembly where we can come together as a community. Huell, one of the interesting things that's happened is our group basically hosted the National Conference of the League of Historic American Theaters. And this is based in Washington. This is a group of people who've been operating and using these buildings for the last 25 years.
All over the country?
All over the country. We had people from 31 states and 4 foreign countries here. I guess the best way to describe it is they were aghast that we had this resource and that we had done no more with it than we have, and that there were no plans in place to do something with the district. They couldn't get over it.
So, in other words, there are people in other cities drooling over what we have here on Broadway that we're not doing anything with.
The worst thing is people come up from these small towns and they'll say, you know, your crummiest theater is better than the only theater we have. Can we trade?
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing.
Well, other cities, though, I mean, look at the Fox Theater in San Francisco that was destroyed. Yes. I mean, other cities have let their theaters go as well.
Other cities have, but very few cities have the quality and the depth of resource that we have, simply because we were busy demolishing Bunker Hill's Victorians and building new office buildings instead of working with this area. Well, it's a gift. They're all still here waiting to be saved.
And is what makes LA so special the fact that there's so many of them in such a small section of town?
That's part of what makes it special, but on the other end, is remember, a lot of our movie palaces here have been in continuous use from the time they were built. And there's not many cities where you can say that, but you can still go to Westwood Village and see a great movie in a movie palace the way you might have 50 years ago.
Yeah. Give us an example of a success story in another place, either in the country or in California, that would give us hope that these things can be saved and made to work?
It's the number is legion. Just a couple of examples. Number one, Pittsburgh. The symphony needed a home in very short notice. They bought the old Lowe's Penn Theater and converted it into Heinz Hall. The Chamber of Commerce there will mark their progress on revitalizing downtown Pittsburgh from the time that the Heinz Hall opened and started bringing X thousands of people a week. In fact, it was so successful that they took over the Stanley Theater about 2 blocks away and did a $45 million restoration and created another multi-use arts center.
Okay, so Pittsburgh took 2 old theaters that were sitting there probably waiting to be demolished like some of these are.
Yes.
Well, but now what are we doing here? We're building this new Disney Hall up here at the Music Center for how many millions of dollars?
Well, 150 million and counting.
I don't want to get in trouble with the Music Center people, but could one of these theaters have been utilized for that sort of thing?
The Los Angeles Theater as a site for the Los Angeles Philharmonic would have been a dream situation. It has exactly the same number of seats they're building in the Disney Pavilion. There's adequate lobby space. Preliminary acoustical estimations are that the sound would be good. But you know, Disney is spending money in New York City on an old theater now.
Yeah, I saw that in the paper. What's the problem here? Why aren't we getting, you know, I don't want to get into the politics of it. That's not my style. But what is it that is keeping this from happening? Everybody I've talked with says they love these old theaters, but they're just sitting here and nothing's really happening.
That's a tough question.
Well, now look. Now you see, that's a perfect example.
Yeah.
That's why people aren't going to get in the car and drive downtown to see a theater.
Sure they will.
They're afraid.
Sure they will.
They're afraid of what may happen to them on this street.
But aren't they afraid of what will happen to their car in the parking lot in Beverly Hills?
Well, but wait a minute. This is a little different.
No,
this is a little different.
This is a city, Huell. It's not Disneyland. I mean, there's dirt on the sidewalk. There's more vitality per square inch of this street than in any 6 suburbs you want to name in Los Angeles. No, everyone here is not white, and that would be the worst thing that could happen to this street, would be to turn it into another lily white yuppie playground. This is the best chance that we as Angelenos have to kind of put it all together. By programming these theaters with a variety of ethnic-related entertainment, populist entertainment, other sort of entertainment, we can make sure that there's a mix of people on this street. The worst thing that could happen would be to build a bunch of parking garages on Broadway. People need to park 2 blocks from the street and walk over here and meet their fellow Angeleno and stop by a Latino bodega and get a papaya, stop by a Chinese restaurant and get an egg roll, any number of possibilities. That is what we ought to be shooting for down here. This is our last chance to have that melting pot kind of place.
Do you think someday, this is what scares me, is that someday we'll look back after all of this has been destroyed and realize what it was we did to ourselves? Kind of like the same way we're all doing now with the fact that we took out our red car system, which was working so well, which was the greatest mass transit system in the history of the world. We had it, and we did away with it. Now we'd give anything to have it back.
Huell, there's absolutely no question about that. And when you look at the massive public investment in recreating a downtown transit system that has its hub here, which is why these theaters are here anyway, when you look at the investment we put at the convention center, and these folks need somewhere to go entertain themselves other than the hotel bar, then we've got some investments to protect. And by doing something smart with these theaters, we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
So where are all these visionaries, all these people in LA that are supposed to be so smart and so creative? Why haven't they come forward and done something about this situation?
I've got a million answers to that question and no answer to that question. My feeling is that we haven't done a good enough job of making them aware of this resource and letting them know that there are some positive things that can be done with it.
Well, it's no secret. Come on, this is, I mean, any developer, anybody who knows anything about the city knows that this is, you know, as far as development is concerned, knows that Broadway is here.
Well, then why would Disney want to go onto 42nd Street? Basically, an environment was created there through the government that made it appealing for Disney to take a chance on that street.
Yeah, we're talking about Disney now, which is spending millions of dollars to redevelop an old theater on Broadway in New York, not Los Angeles.
Right. The New Amsterdam, which is a treasure. It's the only Art Nouveau theater left standing, and it is a magnificent theater. But Disney is going to the worst crime block in the world, 42nd Street between 7th and 8th. They have incentives to go there because the Urban Development Corporation and the 42nd Street Redevelopment Project felt it was important to get an anchor tenant. What would happen if our redevelopment agency or Mayor Reardon said, we have a priority on Broadway. We can do something with these theaters on the short term that would make a big difference on the future of that street. I think that you might find a willingness among some of the same people investing elsewhere to invest here.
Yeah.
They have to have the incentives. There has to be a reason for them to come down here.
Well, let's talk to these policemen. Howdy. Howdy.
Hi,
Huell Howser from KCET.
Nice to meet you, sir.
We're doing a show about these historic theaters downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, do you think that these theaters can ever come back and be the wonderful, glorious places that they used to be? And the question is, how big a role does the average person's perception of crime down here, what role do you think that plays in keeping people away from Broadway, from coming in from the suburbs to go to a movie in one of these old theaters?
Well, you really don't have crime down here, believe it or not. The kind of crime people think, like drive-by shootings and muggings. Right now, our crime rate is really low. But what you do see down here is trash on the street. Right now, we have a program with the Chrysalis Center, and they're basically homeless people picking up the street, you know, and they've done a great job. Look how clean it is.
Yeah.
I haven't seen downtown clean like this in years, okay? Another problem that you have is you have a homeless problem down here. And people look at that and they say, God, this place must be really scary. Antisocial behavior, you know, you got people with mental problems, and that adds to the problem, people not coming down here. So what we're trying to do now with this business improvement district that we have downtown is to address those needs, to bring people back downtown so they can enjoy these beautiful theaters downtown.
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, we just grabbed this guy at random. You should be a spokesperson for the revitalization of Broadway, because, you know, I think once people come down here, they see the excitement and the energy of what this place is all about.
Yeah, you got so many people from Latin America coming down here, from all over, and you have to speak Spanish down here. If you don't speak Spanish, you're not going to communicate. And
wait a minute, I don't speak Spanish.
Well, you stayed here long enough, people will come up to you and they ask, first they'll say, do you speak Spanish? And then they'll start to talk to you in Spanish, okay? But there's a lot to see down here. You just got to give it a chance.
Yeah. See, that's how it all ties in together, isn't it?
Well, and it's the same sort of thing that all of these theaters everywhere, that there's always a perception that it's not safe downtown after dark.
Well, no matter what city you're talking
No matter where you are.
Pittsburgh, for example.
There's a perception that there's no place to park in spite of the fact that there are 10,000 empty spaces after 6 o'clock. There's a perception that there's nothing to put on the stages. It's just happened in scores of cities too many times for me to believe that it can't happen in the entertainment capital of the world.
Yeah. Well, are you optimistic?
Optimism is not something that you can afford a whole lot of if you do this kind of volunteer work. I think that we have come a long, long way in 7 years. I don't think we've come nearly as far as I would like for us to have come in 7 years. But the very fact that we're even studying these theaters and looking for a future for them is a huge step forward, and we're very proud of that.
But there's not a lot of time, is there?
I don't get the sense that there's a lot of time.
I mean, once they're gone, they're gone.
If the buildings are demolished, and we have landmarked all the buildings, it's going to be...
But that doesn't necessarily protect them that much.
No, but it certainly makes life miserable for the owners for a long time.
If they wanted to tear them down.
To take them down. And we're also working with Joel Wack's office on even stronger measures to protect buildings that have been landmarked. The worst thing that can happen, though, is for the theaters to close and be left empty, because once they're left empty, they begin to deteriorate very rapidly. It's next to impossible to keep the vandals out, and a huge amount of damage is done very quickly. And we're very worried about that.